What do you do when the system tells you there's nothing more it can offer? When the diagnosis is final, the prognosis is limited, and the answers stop, but your life doesn't. Today's conversation begins there. My guest, physicist and inventor Samuel Shepherd, was diagnosed with a rare terminal bone cancer and given no viable medical path forward. Instead of surrendering his agency, he turned towards something most of us were never taught to do: investigate the why beneath disease. What would follow was decades of rigorous exploration into inflammation, free radicals, cellular signaling, and a powerful molecule found in nature called astaxanthin. Work that would radically shift how he understood cancer, aging, and the body's capacity for resilience. This is not just a story about rejecting medicine or chasing miracles. It's about curiosity, scientific inquiry, and what becomes possible when we stop outsourcing our inner authority. If you've ever felt that healing requires more than managing symptoms, this conversation will open a door. Now let's dive in. Have you ever noticed your skin reflects your stress? I used to struggle with mine, dry, dull, reactive, until I started pairing nervous system regulation with products that actually honor your body. That's why I love Milk and Butterflies. They handcraft every formula with 100% organic ingredients and powerful aromatherapy oils. They aren't just products for your skin, they're rituals that restore hydration, resilience, and calm even in the busiest seasons of our life. You can try them for yourself and feel the difference. Head to Milk and Butterflies and use my promo code Dr. Kelly for free shipping. That's DRKELLY for free shipping. Also, check out the link in the description for the podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. So honored to have Samuel Shepherd on the podcast today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me.
Absolutely. So I know you're an inventor, an engineer, a physicist, so many accolades, but what I want to dive into that I found so profound was your story. And so would you mind sharing your story and some of the things that you've overcome and some of the epiphanies that you've gained from that?
Sure. I'm not sure oftentimes where to start with this. I usually scare people when I say, well, I was born in 1953. But I'm not going to go back that far.
Yeah.
but I had worked on things for the last 50 years. Some of them were fairly elaborate, and you're seeing some of the effects now. By the way, this is perfect timing in Venezuela, where they're talking about the electromagnetic pulse weapons and auditory weapons. Well, I worked on those in the late 90s in the development of those. And I may have gotten a little too close to something at one point, but I ended up being diagnosed with a bone marrow cancer called polycythemia vera. It's an incurable cancer. It's terminal in most cases. But I went in because my blood pressure, they couldn't get my blood pressure under control. It was at times 180 over 160. I was going to have a stroke or a blood clot was going to hit me, something, and they couldn't figure out what it was. So I did the coronary route, and it turned out I was in perfect shape. I have no blockage. I got a little bit of a heart enlargement because of the high blood pressure. But I received a phone call on a Sunday night from a nurse, and she said the doctor wanted to see me 7:30 Monday morning. If you ever get that call, it's never good. So I went in, and he proceeded to tell me that I had this blood bone cancer. And I asked him, I said, well, what about chemo or radiation? He just shook his head, no. There wasn't enough cases of it at that time, only about 15,000 polycythemia vera cases in the United States. So pharmaceutical companies, if it's not going to make money for them, they don't really focus on it. So there was no treatment. The only treatment that they had at that point was phlebotomies. I had to go in and get my blood removed. So I left the doctor's office, went to the emergency room, and they phlebotomized me, took blood out, reduced the hemoglobin levels, and I did that every month for 4 years just to stay alive.
Wow.
And I was reaching a point in that 4-year period, towards the end of that 4-year period, I was given a prognosis of life expectancy. I had a 3% chance of making it past 10 years. So I was diagnosed after diagnosis. So I was diagnosed in 2003. And so I knew I was 4 years into a 10-year, and I knew I was getting worse because I would actually change color. My blood would get so thick, it was like pumping ketchup. And I was having to go in and get phlebotomized and get the blood out. And anytime they do that, it messes with your electrolytes. And I didn't want to tell anybody I was dying because I had contracts with the Department of Defense, and nobody really wants to do business with a dead man. And I sort of knew that. So I didn't tell anybody. So I just lived with it until it began to get to a point of I couldn't get my blood pressure down. And I knew I was probably going to have a stroke and my family was going to have to take care of me for the rest of my life. And that was not acceptable to me. So I had reached a point sitting at a kitchen table, 4 o'clock in the morning. I point where I got really close to actually communicating with a divine spirit. Is this my purpose? Is this what all this that I've done? Is this how it ends? Is this it? And I truly thought about taking my own life at that point. And I didn't. And I said, well, God, you gave us everything on this planet that we're supposed to be able to live off of. There's got to be something on this planet that doesn't get cancer. And so I had access to a database called ProQuest through the Department of Defense. So I had all the tools in the toolbox. When I look back, every little project I did came to this point in my life. The calculus, the chemical kinetics, the biochemistry, the engineering projects I worked on, not realizing that they were, it was like a generation of assets or tools. And then all of a sudden, when this hit me, I knew I couldn't go forward. I either had to go under the wall or over the wall. And so I applied pretty much every single skill or tool I had in the toolbox. So when I did the search and I found the 5 animals that apparently don't get cancer, the salmon, pink flamingos, sharks, elephants, and naked mole rats. So Scripps Oceanographic had done some work on this, and they were aware that every one of those 5 animals had this molecule in them, and it shouldn't have been in any of them. They don't produce it. There's no value. It's not like a protein, a carbohydrate, or a lipid, or an amino acid. And yet it was found in all 5 of these non-cancerous animals from 5 different species. So I knew it wasn't species specific. And so the astaxanthin came from an algae called Haematococcus pluvialis. And I began growing that in one of these, I call them hillbilly hot tubs, but you buy them at Walmart and you blow them up and you can get in them. But they have a heater and they have an air bubbler. So I could bubble CO2 in and feed the algae, and I could control temperature. I could actually do a scientific algae growth experiment with it. So I got the algae from the University of Texas, and I began growing it in my backyard. And it's a green algae, but we knew that when it was stressed, if its pond was drying out, for example, and it knew that the sun's radiation was going to kill it, it somehow measured the salt content, recognized the salinity increase when the water evaporated, and within 48 hours, it converted from a green algae to a bright red, candy apple red algae. And in my background, anything that I saw red in nature usually was poisonous. So that was something that I wanted to consider. Well, all I did with my Intex pool was I added a lot of salt to my pool and made it think that its pond was drying out. And within 48 hours, it completely converted into this red algae. So I did what's called a DAF, a dissolved air flotation. I bubbled air in, and the algae would float to the surface. And I would skim it off, put it in a dehydrator, get it down under 10% water content, and then it's like a powder, a red powder. And I could put it in my eggs, I could put it in my salads. And I knew it was 3.8% astaxanthin when the algae converts it like that. So now I could calculate based on a certain dose, and I set the original one up at 4 milligrams per day. So I knew it was 3.8% astaxanthin. I could calculate how many grams of the biomass I had to eat to give me the equivalent of 4 milligrams per day. So I did that, and then about 3 or 4 months, I noticed that my hemoglobin wasn't climbing out as fast. Instead of being phlebotomized every month, I'm now being phlebotomized every 2 months. And I wasn't having this problem with these blood pressure spikes. And my real, statistically, it wasn't significant, but it wasn't killing me. When I did my blood work, my liver enzymes were fine, my kidney function was fine. So I thought, okay, this is all moving in the right direction. So I'll just triple the dose. And I went to 12 milligrams per day. At 12 milligrams per day, my phlebotomies went from once a month to once every 4 months. So now, instead of being phlebotomized every month, I'm only being phlebotomized 3 to 4 times a year. That was significant. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, this is actually working. And eventually I got to the point where my phlebotomies got really sort of pressed out. But now I had 3 slopes of the curve. I had no astaxanthin, which was once a month. I had 4 milligrams once every 2 months. And then I had 12 milligrams once every 4 months. Well, from those 3 slopes, I could calculate how much do I have to take so that I'm never phlebotomized for the next 50 years of my life. And it's just a mathematical calculation. And it was 96 milligrams. And in theory, on paper, it looked good. If I take 96 milligrams a day, I should end my phlebotomies. Mm-hmm. So I started taking the equivalent of 100 milligrams per day, and my phlebotomies ended. Wow. My follow-up checkups showed no cancer, no more polycythemia. So then I spent about 3 years. I didn't want to use money from any other place, to any pharmaceutical companies. I had to figure this out myself. So I spent a lot of money, probably about 1.2 million of my own money. And I figured I could either leave it for my children. This is the narcissism of it. I could either leave it for my children or I could use it to save my life. And I chose to save my life. Mm-hmm. But now it took me about four years to really figure out the biochemistry as to why it worked. Mm-hmm. And in that study, it was almost like moving up a tree. You go down one branch, and all of a sudden that branch has 2 branches, and all this, this thing is really getting complex, and so I had to sort of bring it back. And what we found was that there are 4 biological free radicals that cause 92% of all human disease: superoxide, singlet oxygen, the peroxyl, and the hydroxyl free radical. The hydroxyl free radical is probably the most active because it has a longer half-life. It's in your mitochondria longer, and it causes tremendous damage at the DNA level. So that's the one that I thought was really posing the problem. Well, then when I began to look at it, I thought, well, if I purified it and got it into an oil or into a liquid, it would be more potent. That's the chemistry part of my world. The more concentrated it is, the easier it is to control it, and the more potent it should be. And I would get a different dose response curve. Well, so we began to look at the algae biomass, and worked with several companies, but we began to extract it through a process called CO2, supercritical CO2 extraction. And I could extract the astaxanthin directly from the algae. So when we did that, and it's a powder, when it comes out, it's not absorbable. It's almost an inert powder. But when we put it in olive oil, it dissolved. So because it's fat soluble. So it would dissolve, and it made a real nice red oil with the olive oil. And I knew the concentration of the astaxanthin. So I began taking that. When I began taking that more purified form, my phlebotomies returned. And I thought, what in the world have I done? I've inactivated somehow the astaxanthin. And I kept increasing the dose. Where I was taking 100 milligrams per day, I got well over 800 milligrams per day before I turned and watched my hemoglobin start to come back down again. So I knew there was an absorption issue. At 100 milligrams in the algae biomass, it had to be different than when I extracted it. So when we did a mass spec on the astaxanthin in the algae cell in the natural form versus what happened when I applied that supercritical extraction, what we found was in the natural form, it's in the glycosidic form. And what that means, I've had something here. It means that the astaxanthin, and this is how it moves it to the algae moves it to its cell membrane. It has a glucose molecule, a sugar molecule, chemically bonded to the end of it. And that allows it to be transported to the cell membrane to block the sun, to act like a tanning to keep the cell alive in the algae. Well, when we did the supercritical extraction, we cracked that sugar off. It's a high pressure extraction in a very acidic CO2 environment. And the sugar cracked off of the astaxanthin. We ended up with pure astaxanthin. So I knew that the absorption was related to that glycosidic form of the astaxanthin. So I knew how to put molecules onto other molecules without inactivating them because of high temperature. I could get the same kinetic reaction putting the glucose on the astaxanthin, but I had to be at temperatures of about 280 to almost 300 degrees Fahrenheit. At those temperatures, the astaxanthin degrades. So I knew I couldn't cause that reaction to happen unless there was some form of a catalyst. Well, what we found was a frequency, an electromagnetic frequency similar to microwave. And it's just slightly different frequency. But the frequency would vibrate the OH molecule on the astaxanthin and the OH molecule on the sugar, and it would locally give enough energy that they would connect. They would chemically bond.
Wow. So
we patented that. And that's the only, Velasta is the only patented astaxanthin. It may actually be the only patented natural supplement because when we provided the information to the patent office, they were pretty amazed. And so they allowed the patent to go through. The title of the patent, which really shocked me too, they even allowed it, but it's a method for the process of using astaxanthin for the treatment of inflammatory disease, particularly for the treatment of cancer. And the FDA, we have to put dual labels on. The patent office requires us to put that title on. And then the FDA says this product cannot be used to treat, diagnose, or cure any disease. So we have conflicting labels just to be in compliance with the confusion of federal regulations. So I began giving it to family and friends. These were people in desperate need. They were home with hospice, stage 4, 2 to 4 months to live, 3 to 6 months. They had nothing to lose. And their cancers went away in about 30 days. And oncologists began to call me, wanting to know. They were telling them what what this was. And they were calling, wanting to know, what is this? And when I told them, they poo-pooed it. They said, no, it must be a miraculous remission. We've never, we're not going to believe that. And I actually put it in a chocolate bar for my mother, who was 88 at the time, and she was a type 2 diabetic, and she was losing her kidneys, and she wouldn't take the oil. And that was before we had it in capsules. And I said, well, what do you like? She said, well, I like chocolate. I said, if I can put it in chocolate, will you take it? She said, yeah, she would do that. Well, she did that and reversed her kidney failure. And after 48 years of being a type 2 diabetic, she was no longer diabetic.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So that really got people's attention at that point. So we began looking at this, and we kept doing research as to the chemistry, as to how this was working at the cellular level. And a couple things came out that when we talk about the branches that you go down, if we look at Parkinson's, for example, Parkinson's disease, we gave it to a lady in Hershey, Pennsylvania, for arthritis. She was in her early 80s, and she called me on the phone. She'd been taking it for about 2 weeks. And she called me on the phone. And she said, this product is amazing. She said, I don't have arthritis. She said, it took away all of my pain of arthritis. And I said, that's absolutely amazing. If it just did that, that would be a big deal. She said, that's not why I'm calling you, though. She said, something you didn't know, I had severe Parkinson's. She said, I had tremors so bad I couldn't hold food. I couldn't feed myself. I would throw the spoon and all the food. And she says, I don't have tremors anymore.
Wow.
And that sent me back in there to figure out chemically what's going on. Well, what we found was people who have Parkinson's, they theorize, are not producing dopamine in the brain. Well, the reality is they are. The problem is the dopamine is reacting with the hydroxyl free radical, their stress free radical, and it's forming a compound called hydroxydopamine. And the moment I saw that, it was like a light went off, because we use hydroxydopamine to give it to animals to give them Parkinson's, so that Parkinson's medications can be tested on them.
Wow.
And it was like a light bulb went off. It was reverse chemically engineered. So now I knew the chemistry. It's dopamine plus the hydroxyl free radical yields hydroxydopamine. Hydroxydopamine is what causes Parkinson's. Well, what does the medical industry do? They say, well, let's just increase the dopamine level. They're not focused on the hydroxyl, on the stress free radical. So they give them levodopa or carbidopa. They raise that level. Well, their stress level begins to increase until finally it no longer works. They're producing even more hydroxydopamine from that reaction, and then they die. There's nothing else they can do, and they die from that.
It also causes a schizophrenic.
Correct. The bipolarism, the dementia, the seeing of and hearing voices and all that.
Yeah.
Well, what we focused on, since the brain is producing dopamine, let's just reduce the hydroxyl free radical. And that's what the Volasta does. It knocks that down, and all of a sudden their Parkinson's symptoms go away. Then we began to look at it from an inflammatory breast cancer. About a third of breast cancers are in men, by the way. So we had this guy up in Oregon, and he was in his late 70s, and they had sent him home with hospice. He had inflammatory breast cancer. I could show you pictures of it, but it had eaten right out through the wall of his chest, to the point you could look in and see his sternum. That's how aggressive it was. So they sent him home with hospice. They gave him 2 to 4 months to live. And he contacted me and he said, I don't have any other options. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. And I said, well, let's do 2 things. Since you have an open wound and you have cancer visible, would you mind if we just put it on almost like a salve? external and you take it internal orally. He said, sure. Well, when we did that, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I can show
Yeah,
you a picture of it. Um,
absolutely.
his cancer went away. He lived for 3 years and ended up dying of a heart attack playing with his grandchildren,
Oh my gosh. Wow.
cancer free. And
Wow.
that was what really got me on to, we have figured out why people get disease. We
Hmm.
now know why people are sick. Bobby Kennedy has it figured out too. Um, and he knows what's causing it. We have a picture of it here. Thought I did.
I want to take a brief moment to pause from the episode to share something that I've noticed so many women struggle with, and maybe this resonates with you, that you do not feel safe to honor your own needs. You might be the one who learned how to be easy, capable, and reliable, and yet you're tired of overriding yourself. You're tired of explaining your no, you're tired of feeling guilty for wanting space, and tired of shrinking your truth to keep the peace. The thing that most people don't realize is that you can't actually protect your peace without a sense of inner safety. And without that safety, boundaries feel harsh, guilt feels unavoidable, and self respect feels like something you're constantly working at instead of resting into. If you have that quiet, steady craving for self respect, the kind that lives in your body, Self Respect Reset was created for you. It's a guided, body-based experience designed to help you rebuild inner safety, trust yourself again, and honor your needs without guilt, explanation, or self-abandonment. If this speaks to you, you can find the link to join in the show notes. Now back to the episode. With such strong evidence and so many strong links to this really healing cancers and so many other diseases, what is it that is it the pharmaceutical market that's preventing this from being more wide known, or like what is it that this isn't more mainstream?
One of the things that I chose to do early on, because I knew human nature pretty well. I'm 73. There's no surprises. When I wake up tomorrow, 99% of anything's going to happen to me I've already seen.
Hmm.
I've been shot at on several occasions. There was an assassination attempt made on my life because of this.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I'll share that with you too. But
Oh, wow.
so we decided that I was going to focus on my family and friends.
Hmm.
And so we began giving it to them. We did no sales, no marketing, nothing. And I began giving it to them. Well, when their cancers got cured, they told the whole world.
Hmm.
And it went completely around the world.
Wow.
We're now in 27 countries,
Hmm.
all 50 states, and most people have never heard of this.
Hmm.
So now what we're trying to do is to give people a little bit of hope that there's something else out there.
Hmm.
I don't know whether you can see that or not.
I can. Oh, wow.
Okay. That is an open wound
Oh my gosh. And that's
on a
his
male.
chest right there. That's the center of the chest.
Well, his nipple
Oh, okay.
is
Oh,
right there. So it's
wow.
almost like an inflammatory ductal type
Oh
cancer.
gosh. Wow. Mm.
And you can see how inflamed it is all the way around, all the
Hmm.
way up into
Yeah.
into the chest cavity.
Yeah.
So that was on May the 8th of
Hmm.
2019. You can see this,
Hmm.
you see the
Yeah.
date there or not. But
Hmm.
so we had him put it on external and take it internal. This is this is a different picture. This date, it isn't the same date.
Hmm.
But about 30 days later,
Wow. Yeah. Significant difference.
and,
Wow. You can
and
see
it
it's the tissue's healing there.
yep,
Yeah.
a lot of scarring
Yeah.
because the tissue was damaged so
Right.
severely.
Hmm.
But the
Wow.
cancer died, and he lived for another 3 years and ended up
Yeah.
dying of a heart attack while he was running
Wow.
with his grandkids.
Hmm.
But um, there's so many of these. Here's when I talked about an assassination attempt in April of 2019, I was asked to go testify in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
So I went up there and I presented, and there were about 200 people there, some representatives, some senators. I think Ben Carson had a staff there, and the five major hospitals, John Hopkins, Sloan, MD Anderson, Mayo, and the Cleveland Clinic were all in attendance. Went on for 2 hours, and I revealed to them that these four free radicals, there's actually a fifth one also, but we're going to focus on these four for right now, are causing 92% of all human disease. Well, doctors only treat the symptoms.
Right.
We're at the root cause of disease, and that sent ripples through the industry.
There's a lot of money to be lost if you can pull the root out from the base.
Yep. So in July of 2019, the state of Oregon sued me for practicing medicine without a license. And I told them that I'm not a prescribing doctor. I'm a research doctor. I fall under the First Amendment under the federal civil rights statutes. And they immediately dropped the case. Then the state of Texas filed a complaint. And I ended up winning that under the same premise. That was in September of 2019. 2019 was a pretty interesting year.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And then in November of 2019, in my front yard, I was hanging Christmas lights around a fence. And you see the exit of the 223 round that came through.
Oh my God.
Missed me by 4 inches. And the only reason it missed me, there's the inlet.
Oh my gosh. I have like goosebumps.
It was a direct chest shot.
Oh.
And when I was hanging my lights, when that exploded, I got all these wood chips come flying up. And I thought I was holding the lights in my left hand. I thought my lights blew up. I didn't know.
God.
And then I heard the shot. And I jumped behind that black truck there, and I yelled up. I said, "Stop shooting!" And I didn't hear anything. And but those lights, I have a plug right back here, and the plug. I always have my lights on when I'm hanging them because invariably a bulb will burst or they'll go out or something. So, well, my lights went out, and the same instant I reached back for the plug, he shot, and the bullet came just underneath my armpit, and we don't know where it went after it came out of the fence.
Oh my gosh.
So I bolted in the house and called the sheriff. So there's a police report filed on it, Lexington, South Carolina, if somebody wants to say I made up the story.
Wow.
So he came out, he put a wire in that hole, and the trajectory showed it coming out of, if you look up here in the leaves, he had piled up and was laying in those leaves for at least 2 hours.
Just waiting. Oh my.
Yep. And I asked the cop how he knew. He said, well, we think he rolled over and urinated. So we know it was at least 2 hours. And there was a boot print that they could have, that they casted, but they never caught, never caught anybody. So
scary.
I had an FBI agent call me, and he said he was working on 17 other cases. And at this point, I'm his only survivor.
Oh my God.
I said, "You've got to be kidding me." He said, "No." He said, "Everyone else, all these doctors working on the causes of disease, all dead from suicide, declared suicides." He said, "You're my only survivor." And I thought, is this for real? I'm still thinking deer hunter. So I mentioned to him, I said, "Are you sure this wasn't just some deer hunter up there hunting?" He said, no, Mr. Shepard. He said, for 3 reasons. First of all, deer hunter knows not to shoot towards houses. Second of all, deer hunter doesn't shoot with a 223 round. A deer hunter doesn't shoot at ground level. They're in a tree stand shooting down into the ground. And he said, no. He said, this was an intentional shot. I said, well, how do you stop it? And he gave me the best advice. He said, there's only one way to stop this. He said, you have to go public with everything you know. All these other doctors tried to keep it hidden for personal reasons and business reasons, trying to keep something proprietary held back, some information. He said, you can't hold any information back. So I said, okay. So I did in December of 2019, all through January of 2020. I did
Mhm.
videos, over 20 videos on YouTube, and
Mhm.
linked it by disease: type 2 diabetes, cancer,
Mhm.
arthritis, why it works, irritable bowel, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS.
Mhm.
And I haven't had any trouble since.
Wow. Oh
Nobody's
my
come
gosh.
after me. Um, so it this this was a weird game, but now it doesn't make sense for anybody to take me out because Pandora's out of the box.
Mhm.
Whether I'm here or not now doesn't
Right.
make any difference. And it's people like you that
Mhm.
at least is getting word out that this is a viable option.
Mhm.
Um, so that's pretty much how
Wow.
we got here.
Oh my
And
gosh. There's so much to unpack. Wow. I appreciate you sharing your story. It's so profound on so many levels. Like, and I just love where you started and all the foundational work that you didn't even realize was part of this
right.
process to bring you to here. And I have a question about I wanted to go back to the five animals that didn't have cancer. What was the link between the algae and them? Is it just that they both had that compound in them, or
Well, when we went back in, because I asked the same question,
Mm-hmm.
and and it was it didn't make sense to me because it was such a wide range of animal species.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, why does this animal have it, and that where are they getting it from?
Yeah.
So if we go with the naked mole rat first, and it eats the roots in the soil of grass and weeds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a fungus that grows on those roots, and that fungus has astaxanthin in it. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
yeast or a fungus that they were consuming. That's what made their little bodies pink. You can look them up, and they're
Oh,
all
wow.
pink because of
Yeah.
the red astaxanthin. And then we looked at salmon, the pink salmon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the salmon eat the shrimp and the herring that eats it's a whole biological chain. So you have the algae, then you have the protozoa and the protists that eat the algae, and then you have euglena and other organisms that eat the protists, and then the shrimp finally eat the algae and the protists, and they bioaccumulate the astaxanthin because it's fat soluble.
Mm-hmm.
It really, once it gets into the fat part of their tissue, it resides there. Well, the shrimp are red when you boil them because of astaxanthin.
Hmm. Wow.
That's where the red comes from. So then the salmon, then the herring eat the shrimp. Um, we think whales don't get cancer, but there's been no proof of that yet.
Mm-hmm.
The baleen whales eat large amounts of red krill and
Mm-hmm.
shrimp that have a huge amount of this astaxanthin, and they can live to be 100 years old. They don't die. They're almost immortal if
Mm-hmm.
we didn't kill them. So the salmon are pink, and they need that antioxidant protection when they go from salt water to fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a high stressed existence, so stressful that they barely lay their eggs and then they die. That's how stressful it is. And the astaxanthin is what keeps their life in check,
Mm-hmm.
keeps them from dying. And then in elephants, that was the one that got me. Why don't elephants get cancer? And why is there so much astaxanthin in elephants? So when we went back and looked at their life cycle, elephants are always looking for water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they find the slimiest pools of water because every animal on the savannah has come to that water hole, and they've all defecated around that water hole, loaded with nutrients. Well, the algae uses those nutrients as food in a water environment. Well, this algae lives in high temperatures on the savannah, so it turns red.
Mm-hmm.
So the algae is all throughout the water that the elephants suck up into their trunk,
Mm-hmm.
and they digest it. Huge amounts of it, by the way. If you look at the tons of algal biomass that they consume in just sucking up that water soup
Mm-hmm.
just to get a drink of water is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then the pink flamingos
Mm-hmm.
go through and pick up the krill in these high salinity ponds,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the astaxanthin there that the protists and uh, the krill actually are consuming, and the
Mm-hmm.
flamingos eat that. That's why they're pink.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
elephants are pink, flamingos are pink, salmon are pink, these
Mhm.
mole rats are pink. Sharks get it by bioaccumulating them eating salmon
Mhm.
and eating it bioaccumulates based off of their food intake.
Mhm. If you eat salmon and you eat shrimp, are you also getting that into your system, or how does that
But
work?
not enough.
Not enough. Okay.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
enough. You'd have to eat 2.5 pounds of salmon every day to
Oh my gosh.
equal one of our capsules.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
the difference.
Yeah.
Um, it truly is quantity
Hmm.
is what makes the difference. So when we get somebody who's diseased, first of all, everyone should get their HSCRP run.
Hmm.
It's a blood test. And when you go in, you make sure your doctor includes that when he checks the box on your on what, yeah, HSCRP, high
CRP.
sensitivity
Hmm.
C reactive protein. That's a measure of your inflammatory disease state. If that
Hmm.
number is over 3 milligrams per liter, you are going to get a disease. It's a matter of time, and
Hmm.
it's a function of your natural cellular antioxidant levels.
Hmm.
So in young people, we could or did a lot of stupid things.
Hmm.
We could drink a lot of beer. We could stay up late. We could eat all kinds of food. Um, we could smoke catalase and superoxide dismutase.
Hmm.
Well, in women at age 42, nature cuts off about 80% of those cellular antioxidants.
Hmm.
That's why women get sick. And that's the free radical concentration that causes a lot of their change of life issues.
Hmm.
So from age 42 in women on average, that's called age onset diseases. You start to get irritable. You start to get your joints hurt. Your fingers are stiff in the morning. You start retaining fluid. Your kidney function drops off, doesn't become as efficient. For men, it's age 50.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, it's nature's way of taking us out. When we stop producing glutathione intracellular inside the cell to protect the mitochondria, we're dying.
Hmm.
And it can be a quick process. Everybody presents differently. Some present with cancer, some present with type 2 diabetes, um, um, arthritis, irritable bowel, Hashimoto's disease, beginnings of dementia.
Hmm.
Well, it turns out that the Velasta is 22 times more potent than glutathione.
Wow.
No glutathione shots. You can't get glutathione past your stomach, so you can't get those antioxidants orally. You can't get
Hmm.
them exogenously. You can't get them from outside the body. The way that glutathione is made, it's made in the intracellular. So you have to have leucine, isoleucine, these basic amino acids, and then your body builds and creates glutathione and
Hmm.
catalase. You can't get it by trying to ingest more glutathione or even trying to do intravenous injections of glutathione because you can't get it into the cell through the cell membrane. The way astaxanthin works is it's the first one that we saw came out of research done by Dr. Allison, MD Anderson. He won a Nobel Peace Prize on it, on finding the PDL1. PDL1 is a protein that sticks up through the cell membrane. So if this is a cell membrane,
Hmm.
there's a little protein that sticks up, hundreds of these on cancer
Hmm.
cells. They're also on normal cells, but there's hundreds of times more on cancer cells. Well, with this little protein sticking up through the cell wall, if a T cell comes down, it has a PD-1, and
Hmm.
it's checking the health of every cell in your body 24 hours a day and never rests.
Hmm.
So it's checking every cell. So it has a PD-1. And if the PD-1 touches the PDL1, your immune system runs away. It says, well, that's a normal cell. I'm not going to kill it. But if it come up to a bacteria, that doesn't have the PD-L1 and it looks for it, in 4 seconds, it kills that bacteria. 4 seconds.
Wow.
So what Dr. Allison said was, let's develop a molecule that sticks to the end of the PD-L1. So when the T cell comes down, it can't make contact. Even though it's there, it can't make contact with it, and it will kill that cancer cell in 4 seconds. The very first material they used was astaxanthin.
Wow.
They saw that the astaxanthin stuck to the end of the tyrosine, which is the functional group on this PD-L1, stuck to it, and your immune system would then kill it. But not every cancer cell is PD-L1 positive. Only about 40% of cancers do have that exhibit. Well, when we began to look at cancers like glioblastoma in the brain, very deadly cancer, we found that if we gave them Vilasta, that cancer died. Currently, we have 18 cases, and in 100% of those, all 18 have eradicated their glioblastoma simply with Vilasta.
Wow.
So that sent us back to the drawing board. What else is going on here? Well, when we put the glycosidic, the glucose molecule, onto the astaxanthin, cancer loves sugar. So this thing gets absorbed through the small bowel very readily because of that sugar molecule. It goes through the bloodstream, gets to the cancer cell. The cancer sees that sugar and says, I want that sugar. Well, it's chemically bound to the astaxanthin. So it goes inside the cancer cell. Then there's lysis enzymes that actually crack that sugar off. And the cancer uses that for energy in its mitochondria. Now the astaxanthin is intracellular. It's called a Trojan horse. And we could do this with bioweapons development also. So it's time released. So the astaxanthin is inside the cell. Well, the hydroxyl free radical is missing an electron in its outermost orbital. That's what makes it so reactive. Anything it touches, it will steal an electron from it, and whatever it stole, that works. But the hydroxyl free radical has equal number of protons as it has electrons, but it's missing one in its outermost orbital. So it has a charge of 0. The plus and minuses cancel each other out. So it has a neutral charge, but still highly reactive. Well, the astaxanthin will donate an electron to the hydroxyl free radical. Well, the hydroxyl free radical has a pH of acidic, 5.2 to 6.8. So cancer cells are well in an acidic environment. And that acid kills adjacent normal cells that allows the cancer more volume to grow into. And that's why we lose weight. Our normal cells are dying. So when the astaxanthin donates an electron to the OH 0 charge, the OH becomes a -1, a hydroxyl ion. Well, the pH of a hydroxyl ion is 12. Completely alkaline.
Yeah.
And that alkalinity, I grew up with my mother or my grandmother, and she could make soap. And the way they made soap was they used fatty acids, fats, with caustic, either sodium hydroxide or calcium hydroxide, lime. And it's called saponification from a chemical process. So you could make soap, water-soluble soap. Well, the phospholipid membrane around every cell is made up of lipids, fatty acids. And there's a phosphate group that's on there that ends up being a very good boundary. Well, when the OH 0 charge of the free radical is converted into an OH -1, that's caustic. That reacts with the fatty acids in the cell membrane, turns it to soap. The cell membrane ruptures, and all of the guts of the cancer cell come flying out. The cancer cell becomes non-viable and dies. Shows up as now your immune system can clean up the mess, clean up all the dead bodies on the battlefield. So there's two methods of kill, and I think that's why we're seeing such a strong positive effect of taking Velasta. Um, then the NIH was allocated money after I spoke in April of 2019, and now there's thousands of peer-reviewed papers out there. You don't have to believe anything I'm telling you. They allocated money, I think, to prove me wrong, which is okay. That's a good scientific way of doing it. They end up proving me right. So you can Google NIH and astaxanthin and whatever disease, cancer, arthritis, inflammation, irritable bowel, Hashimoto's, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, and they all have these studies that they've done now. It still hasn't made it down to the medical world. Doctors don't read research papers. Only pharmaceutical companies read research papers, and they're stifling all of it.
Wow. What a huge shame for so many people who
Oh, it is.
That is awful. That's awful.
I deal with death and dying every day. Probably 20 phone calls a day of people in desperation. The doctor has sent them home, no hope. Here's hospice. Here's morphine. You have 4 months left. That's hard for people to come to grips with. And what I want to do is prevent people from ever getting to that level.
Right.
So what we're telling people is get your HSCRP run. You have less than a 3% chance over your life of ever getting a disease if you can keep your HSCRP under 3 milligrams per liter. So we have a preventative protocol, and it seems to be working. People see changes in 3 days, 4 days from arthritis, and they're amazed. They've been battling it for 20 years, and all of a sudden, it's not there anymore. This is, I don't even think we fully understand the implications of this yet.
Right. It's so profound. Just the stories you've shared today. I mean, it's amazing that where this could go and how much more life force we would all have within us if we weren't navigating these inflammatory diseases that we're navigating. And I have a question about when you were taking it, I know you mentioned you got up to 800 milligrams. Does your body accommodate? So when you take this, does your body accommodate to the dosage? Like, do you need more and more, or was it just because of how serious your cancer was that you had to go up to that level?
Yeah, there's two mechanisms of absorption and adsorption. So in absorption, that's the ability of a molecule to transport or be transported into another environment. So that there's two mechanisms. There's an enzymatic mechanism where you can have enzymes that will actually pick that molecule up in the small bowel and transport it. There's also a term called concentration gradient, and that's diffusion control. We use it a lot in organic chemistry to get things into cellular membranes just by increasing the concentration on this side of the membrane here. And depending on what this membrane is, we'll drive a few more molecules that come out over here. Well, that's called concentration gradient. The higher I make the concentration here, the more molecules I get that migrate through. So there's two mechanisms. And I think what happened was I got into a situation where I couldn't even get the astaxanthin in the non-glycosidic form. I couldn't get it into the small bowel. So I just kept increasing the concentration in the small bowel until I forced it through the cell membrane into the bloodstream. And that was the point at which I hit. And then once it's in the bloodstream, it's carried inside the glucose channels or in some other. Well, you have the same issue. If the concentration gets so high on the other side of the cell membrane, let's say this is the phospholipid membrane of the cell, as So I've got to increase, if I don't have a mechanism of sneaking it in, like the glycosidic astaxanthin will come in through a glucose channel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a pathway for it. If there is no pathway, then the astaxanthin will accumulate in the phospholipid membrane. And if more astaxanthin is out here, it'll force this one into the cell.
Mm-hmm.
That's a much slower process.
Yeah.
We see the same thing with type 2 diabetes. So what happens in type 2 diabetes is it's usually insulin resistance. So when insulin is produced from the DNA into the RNA and then into an insulin protein, then it's folded. It's usually hydrogen bonding, but it bends and it folds until you end up with a goo of insulin.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like that. That would be a protein molecule that's floating around in your bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
Right there is the functional group, this little tip sticking up. Well, that's what makes insulin effective, because on your cell you have an insulin receptor. So when the insulin comes down, it fits perfectly inside. It's like a key in a lock.
Mm-hmm.
Fits perfectly in that receptor. When that happens, it sends an electric charge down it's called electron transport, down the cell membrane to the glucose channel. Glucose channels are typically closed. But when it gets that electric signal, it goes and opens up. Now sugar can freely flow from your bloodstream into the cell. Mm-hmm. In diabetics, it doesn't get that signal. And these glucose channels remain closed. Mm-hmm. Now, the body says, or the cells are saying, I'm starving. Sends signals to the brain, says, I need you to eat a Snickers bar right now, because it's going to start raising your blood sugar levels to increase that concentration gradient to mass diffuse through your cell membrane into that cell. That's how desperate and survival that cell is.
Yeah.
So what we said is, why is this insulin, and this is how type 2 diabetes can be stopped. Why is that insulin not functional? Well, it turns out you have a hydroxyl free radical, comes over here and steals an electron from it. And guess what? It completely misfolds. Now, from a probability, a mathematical point of view, what's the probability of this string finding the right functional group to hit the insulin receptor perfectly?
Right.
There's more area here. So it becomes a probability game. That's called insulin resistance. And if it can't make contact, those glucose channels never open. Your blood sugar levels start to increase in your bloodstream, trying to mass diffuse sugar through the cell membrane to get it into the mitochondria just to stay alive.
Wow. Yeah. I'm like, it's amazing just like how much it functions to like overcome so many of these diseases that like it's just amazing. It's like mind blowing. And I know you talked about Parkinson's, but I'm also curious about like dementia. Do you have any evidence
it's the same
of like
thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
MIT, Dr. Li Wei Sai, the Picower Institute, he did a lot of work on uncovering what causes Alzheimer's and dementia. And it turns out to be the amyloid beta plaque. There's a protein called amyloid beta. In a high-stressed environment where you have a lot of these free radicals, that amyloid plaque will misfold, or it will completely change its three-dimensional shape to the point it will form a crystalline structure. So in a nerve, let's say that knot is the nerve body, and this is what's called an axon. And down here, it touches a lot of other nerve bodies, and that's called the neuronal network. On this wire, this electrical axon that sends the electrical pulse down, there's myelin, which is like a fatty insulating material that coats that, so you don't get any short circuits. You don't get electric signals flying off. That's what happens with the synaptic gap during drugs and LSD, for example. The synaptic gap widens and you leak some of these neurochemicals, and that's what gives you hallucinations and colors and all that. That's a whole other podcast. So when the amyloid plaque begins to accumulate, and it accumulates for a couple of reasons. One is the rate of your oxidative stress disease. The more you have, the more you're going to have more of this amyloid plaque. The other one is we have microglia in our brain. We don't really know what they are. They're not human. They don't have any DNA in them. They look like an octopus. And they swing through all the neuronal nerves looking for crap to clean up. This could be viruses. It could be debris, cellular debris. But it's looking for all of that material. It's like the waste management of our brains. And they're immortal. We believe they live forever. We're born with them and we die with them. And they live our entire life trying to clean our brain. Well, we approach it two different ways. I'm going to stop the rate at which the amyloid plaque forms by using Velasta. So I stop the oxidative stress, and the Velasta crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's one of the few supplements that does. So it stops the misfolding or the plaque formation. But in a lot of cases, the damage is already done. There's already a lot of plaque around there. So we rely on the microglia to try to chew it up and get it off of there before the neuron dies. In elderly people, the microglia become very sluggish. They almost go into hibernation. They slow down. If you're going to sit and watch TV and operate at a very low frequency, brain frequency in the gamma frequency range, the microglia almost become non-existent, so there's no removal of the amyloid plaque. So what Dr. Liwei Tsai found was that if she hit that occipital lobe with 40 flashes per second of light, it activated the microglia. The microglia began eating the amyloid plaque, and she reversed Alzheimer's in mice. Well, I built those devices, electromagnetic pulse devices. So I contacted them and I said, you're not going to be able to drill holes in people's heads and put in a fiber optic to flash light onto their brain. I said, suppose I could send that same light pulse through the eye, because the eye changes your brain frequency. What you see, the eye's very good at converting photons into electrons at the exact same frequency. So if I have light that's going flunt, 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 if I watch that for a long enough period of time and I watch the alpha, beta, theta, and gamma frequencies in the brain, you'll see your brain frequencies start to match that same frequency, and you'll go to sleep. That's why it's very difficult to sleep with a light on. Lights operate at 60 hertz. That's 120 flashes a second. That's perfect for learning. That keeps the brain operating at 120 flashes per second. You're very active. But to go to sleep, you have to slow that down.
Yeah.
And once you get down around 30 hertz, you get, we actually have it mapped by brain frequency and fear and anxiety that we would put into an enemy soldier to get them to surrender instead of us having to kill them.
Wow.
So we could create more fear, more anxiety in them.
Just by the lights?
Just with the light, the flashing light.
Oh
so we develop, you'll see it on the website at velasta.net, the VLED. The VLED is a device that came out of that work that I did at the Brooks Air Force Base. And it flashes, as long as you're getting the photons into your eye, we can stop the progression of Alzheimer's. Every nursing home should have this in their rec center. Instead of operating at 60 hertz, they should be operating at 20 hertz, which is 40 flashes per second.
Yeah.
And it stops the dementia.
Oh my gosh. It's like, it's so like, I mean, it's like you want to scream from the rooftops of like, because so many people, I mean, I've worked in assisted livings for years, and it's just like so much suffering, so much inflammatory disease. So like everyone's on medications, like, and such decreased quality of life because of that. And it's to know that there's something that could really profoundly change this is It's phenomenal.
We have several doctors now that are taking it themselves, and they
Hmm.
still won't prescribe it to their patients because they lose their liability if something goes wrong. They're afraid of the lawyers at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So legal liability is a problem. That was one of the things that they had to do with the COVID vaccine was the federal government had to indemnify all of the vaccine producers before they would issue the vaccine, and they end up killing a lot of people from the vaccine. The vaccine creates an inflammatory disease state.
Mm-hmm.
And in the elderly, they don't have the glutathione, the catalase, or the superoxide dismutase to combat it.
Yeah.
So how does the body fight inflammation? Well, if it's inflammation in the lungs, it's the solution to pollution is dilution.
Mm.
So when you get an inflamed lung disease or a cold, what's your body do? It pumps fluid in, tries
Mm-hmm.
to dilute everything either to your liver or to your kidneys. And it tries it. If you're not good at getting that fluid out, you eventually fill up and you die from pneumonia.
Mm.
The same thing happens when you get sunburn and you get a blister. What's the first thing that happens? Water gets pumped in to
Mm.
chew up all of the damage and the free radicals generated by the ultraviolet light.
Mm-hmm.
So the solution to pollution is dilution.
Mm.
All inflammation, I don't care whether you're genetically predisposed, all of those have to go through those reactive oxygen species segment of the pathway. If I can
Mm-hmm.
interrupt the pathway, you don't get the disease.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I had mononucleosis when I was 16 years old. I still carry that virus. It's called the CMV virus, the cytomegalovirus. I still carry it.
Mm-hmm.
That virus could kill me. It could also end up giving me shingles, if my immune system breaks down. So, but that virus resides in the base of my skull and the spinal fluid where your immune system will not attack it. Every virus we get, we retain for the rest of our lives.
Mm.
Our immune system, if it tries to come down the nerve sheath or break out, our immune system hopefully has a immunoglobulin or an antibody that holds it at bay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's never the virus that kills anyone. It's never the genetic predisposition that kills anyone. It's never the bacteria that kills anyone. It's the inflammation caused by that bacteria that's killing everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And now we know the inflammatory markers, the interleukin 6, the NF kappa beta, we know the chemistry as to how that works.
Mm-hmm.
The Velasta stops it. It stops that chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't get those diseases.
Mm. Wow. I'm curious, like when you recover from those diseases, do you have a protocol that you continue to take Vilasta, or is it like the disease is gone and then you stop it? How does that work as far as afterwards?
Everyone should maintain their HSCRP under 3 milligrams per liter.
Hmm.
If you can keep it there without the Velasta, that's fine.
Hmm.
Don't take, there's no sense in throwing your money away.
Yeah.
But the moment your HSCRP gets above 3 for longer than 3 to 6 months, you're going to get a disease. You're going to wake up with stiff fingers. You're going to have irritable bowel. There's going to be some inflammatory issue that's going to happen.
Hmm.
So what we tell people was, as long as you've got your inflammatory disease state under control. Now, there's several ways of doing it. I was so pleased to see Marty and Dr. Oz and Bobby Kennedy flip the food pyramid.
Hmm.
He's absolutely correct.
Hmm.
And this is one that really sets people off when I say it. But the number one cause of in your diet that causes disease is fructose.
Hmm.
Fructose is 50% of the sugar, table sugar molecule. It's in most fruits. It's in all your breads.
Hmm.
Fructose cannot be used by any cell in your body. It is technically a poison. But that's where we get our desire for sweetness from.
Hmm.
So I always use the analogy, uh, Eve introduced inflammatory disease when she ate the fruit of the apple. That was the beginning of, and that's why they said you will surely die.
Mm.
That's because fructose is a poison, but it tastes so sweet.
Yeah, it's a
It's
tough
like
one.
a, yeah,
Hmm.
it's like a tempting desire that we give
Right.
into.
Hmm.
But when I went back and looked at cancer rates prior to 1966, the
Hmm.
cancer rate was one cancer out of 50, and everybody smoked cigarettes,
Mm.
but it was only one out of 50. And then after 1966, it became one in three.
Mm.
So I was able epidemiologically to come in and say, what happened in 1966? That was the focal point.
Oh.
Well, you probably write a book on this or do a movie. But in 1966, 1965, and Lyndon Johnson went to the USDA and he said, I need money to fight the Vietnam War. Congress was not going to approve it because there was no declaration of war. So he had no money to fund it. So he went to the USDA and he says, I'm going to cut the corn subsidy out of the USDA because as the executive, he had the power to do that.
Mm.
And the USDA says, you'll bankrupt all these farmers. They're totally dependent on that subsidy just to keep their farms going and feeding people in the United States.
Mhm.
So the USDA countered and said, if you agree to put fructose, high fructose corn syrup, into the food system,
Mm.
we will forego that subsidy. He agreed. And in the early 70s, the cancer rate jumped to one in three.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Wow.
what's killing us.
Hmm.
Now, there are some low fructose fruits like blueberries, blackberries, things that have less than 4 grams of fructose per 100 grams of fruit. Your
Hmm.
body seems to be able to handle that,
Yeah.
but everybody's a little different.
Hmm.
So, the the other antioxidant characteristics of blueberries, for example, would more than offset the damage caused by the fructose.
Hmm.
Somebody asked me, they said, well, what size apple? Because the white part is the fruit. There's high fructose in that fruit. But the antioxidants are in the skin and in the seeds.
Hmm.
And somebody asked me, they said, well, what size apple can I eat so that the
It balances
antioxidant,
out.
it just balances
Yeah.
out? And I thought that's a pretty good question. So I went back to the chemistry of it, and it turns out that the apple has to be less than 3/4 of an inch in diameter.
Oh my gosh.
That's crab apples we
Yeah.
could eat. Small apples we could eat back in the
Yeah.
1880s or when Johnny Appleseed was going around. They were small
Mhm.
apples.
Right. Now one downstairs is big. Yeah.
Now we hybridize those
Mhm.
apples to produce more fructose because of people will pay for sweetness.
Hmm.
People pay for nature's candy,
Yeah.
and that's the problem.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It's
And
a
all the
life.
hidden high fructose corn syrup that's in everything. Yeah.
It's in everything,
Hmm.
and that's how it got there. Every piece of bread you eat has it in it.
Hmm.
50% of table sugar is fructose.
Hmm.
Glucose, which is the other half of the table sugar, that's used by every cell in your body. That
Hmm.
feeds your brain, that feeds all your organs. Fructose isn't used by a single one. As a matter of fact, it's the primary cause of high cholesterol.
Hmm. Wow.
So they used to call it the COPS disease. COPS always had a problem with triglycerides in their blood work. They had to always get them down. Cholesterol levels were high. Well, the joke was they spent too much time in donut shops. That was always the sort of the
Hmm.
joke.
Yeah.
But when fructose is metabolized in the liver, it's converted into triglycerides.
Mm.
And then once triglycerides hit about 400 nanograms per liter in the bloodstream, the liver will convert that into LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol.
Hmm.
And so that's where we're getting our cholesterol from. It's not coming from animal fats, it's not coming from oils. The majority of it is coming from sugar and primarily fructose.
Wow. It's so I mean, yeah, I mean, I always look at the labels and we're very conscious of that, but it's so hard to avoid those things unless you're completely It's tough. Yeah. It's just tough to do that, but it's so good to be aware of that. And again, I love the suggestion of getting that blood work. And so you can actually see where you are and know like, okay, like with the lifestyle I'm living, what is my inflammatory numbers and like
Correct.
how am I showing up and am I at risk of disease and how do I start making some changes now?
And
Yeah.
be aware that when you go into your doctor and you ask them to include the HSCRP on your blood work,
Mhm.
they're going to give you every reason not to
Why is that?
because they can't treat to it.
Mm.
The way they treat inflammation is with steroids,
Hmm.
and they're not going to give people steroids. So since they can't treat under medical terms to get your HSCRP lower,
Hmm.
and they don't recognize Velasta as an anti-inflammatory, a
Yeah.
natural. There's no side effects to this.
Hmm.
We've been as high as 3,000 milligrams per liter in an inflammatory breast cancer case, and her breast cancer went away in 42 days.
Oh my gosh.
MD Anderson gave her 2 to 4 months, had
Mm.
hospice living with her, and they were shocked.
Hmm.
And that's where I think the complaint came from because they called me and accused me again of practicing medicine without a license.
Mm.
And I mean, it's been a pretty interesting ride, but I'm 73 years old. I have no more fear in my life.
Hmm.
I don't fear my children dying. I don't fear being beheaded. I don't fear World War III. I can't think of anything that I'm truly afraid of anymore.
Hmm.
And I don't know whether it comes from a strong belief in God. I don't know whether it comes from the journey that I was on. Did I already die?
Yeah.
My life sort of ended. I went through all the stages of terminality,
Hmm.
and I woke up one day and I'm still here.
Right. Could be also
And I'm
too, this
going,
is your
yeah,
purpose. Maybe you're living your purpose. And I think sometimes people are afraid of dying because they haven't yet discovered their purpose.
yeah. And I think
Yeah.
once you discover your purpose, there's no more fear of dying.
Yeah,
I
because you're
don't,
doing it.
yeah, you know what? I'm not going to live forever.
Hmm.
It's like what they told the young kamikaze pilots in Japan in World War II. They said, whether you live another day or you live to be 80 years old, in the scheme of things, you're here for but a short time.
Mm. Hmm. Wow.
And I see it in unbelievers. They panic.
Hmm.
They want to live forever. And I keep telling them, I said, you're not going to live forever.
Hmm.
You've been given a time here to get right and
Right.
to figure it out because we are all going to die.
Hmm.
But it's not the quantity of life, it's the quality of life
Right.
that matters.
Hmm.
I'm still able to think. I'm building a supercapacitor technology that's going to replace lithium iron phosphate batteries.
Oh my
It's a
God.
game changer.
Wow.
Every home will, instead of having a gasoline and diesel generator or natural gas generator to run your house, if you have these capacitor banks sitting there, it will run your house for a whole month with no
Oh my
electricity hooked up
gosh.
to it.
Wow.
That technology, I've got two patents in patent pending mode now
Hmm.
on three-dimensional capacitors and a polymer, an electric conducting polymer
Hmm.
that allows us to operate at the nano level for these supercapacitors. That's a
Wow.
whole other discussion.
And that's, yeah, it's amazing. Oh my gosh. But it's like so cool. I mean, it's amazing that now you're saying like what you're talking about with Vlasta and all like the technology and how you have that. It's just the quality and giving people their life back. I mean, there's nothing greater than that.
I don't think so. Even if
Mhm.
I still get goosebumps when people
Yeah.
call up or I just got a letter from a lady that said that this this gave me a new life.
Hmm.
And so I wrote back to her and I said, use it to the best of your ability.
Right.
Do your best and God will do the rest.
Yeah.
And that's all we really have.
Yeah. And then the ripple effect of that too. Like now people, you've been faced with some major things, and I think it gives you a different perspective when you're that close to something that could end your life to realize like, oh, how short this time is and to make the most of it
Yeah.
and really embrace every day. I think it's like that ripple effect of like, we don't want to not let our gifts be into this world. We don't want to not bring our gifts into this world. We want to bring them in now with the time that we have. And if you have that quality of life, like what that can do for everybody is tremendous.
There's a Yiddish term or a Jewish term, Hebrew term called malach,
Hmm.
and what that means is that it's a messenger.
Hmm.
We're given these gifts not of anything that I've ever done or deserved in my life, but for some reason, every single human being is given a gift and they have to recognize it. And in every case, fear always defeats it.
Hmm.
Can
Hmm.
you stand in an amphitheater and be eaten by lions?
Hmm.
You know, I fear is what destroys us.
Hmm.
And everybody's got to come to terms with why they do the things they do and what fear they're trying to avoid. Um, but when fear goes away, the guardrails go away.
Hmm.
Instead of me looking down an interstate with guardrails, I can now look over and see the valleys and the forest and the green trees and
Right.
my life began at the moment I was dying.
Hmm.
And that's hard for people to understand unless you've gone through it.
Hmm.
These are life-changing situations that people are put in, and we're all given limited amount of time to accomplish them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I could get on a philosophical rant here, I
Yeah.
guess, but it's
Yeah.
life short.
Hmm. Absolutely. I haven't had that experience personally, but my brother passed away at 41 2 years ago. And
Mm.
so that changed my life because I'm turning 41 this year and it just puts things in perspective of like how short it is. And you don't know how long you have. That's completely unexpected. So it really does change when you have someone that close or if you're going through it yourself, you really see life differently of like, you can't let fear hold you back anymore.
Every day, we just I just had this discussion with my wife. I said, you know, I remember things as if they were yesterday, but they happened 10 years ago.
Hmm.
10 years from now, I'll be 83. I'll probably be dead. You know, when you start putting this in perspective, let me give you another example.
Hmm.
Dr. Kais, he's the inventor of the Kais coronary stent.
Hmm.
70 years old, number one cardiologist in Poland,
Hmm.
and he and I are very good friends. And he runs the Heart Institute in San Antonio. He's taught classes at Baylor.
Hmm.
So we put him on. He's taking Velasta for a situation he's got. Well, my wife and I have been on this longer than anybody else on the planet.
Hmm.
So he said, he asked us if we would volunteer to come into his lab there in San Antonio, and he would do a heart catheterization. And he wanted to go in and look all of our major arteries up into our brain and around our heart and around our lungs. He wanted to look around and just see what our coronary health is. How much
Hmm.
atherosclerosis do we have at our age? And we were 70 at the time.
Hmm.
And we decided not to fly over. We decided to drive over. So we had 7 days to think about what we're doing here.
Yeah, right.
So my wife was a little apprehensive, and I looked at it as a science project, really.
Hmm.
So we show up over there, and Monday we go through a bunch of paperwork. We sign our lives away. They can't be sued. Um, Second day was massive physical testing,
Hmm.
treadmill, sonogram, heart scans.
Hmm.
Um, they run us, 8 hours.
Hmm.
It's pretty intense. And then Wednesday morning, I was to go in at 6:30. So I go in and I'm laying on a scan, laying on this table, and I've got a TV screen above me. And I'm looking at my heart beating. I can see things moving on this thing. Well, pretty soon I see comes into the view this wire
Hmm.
goes through my aortic arch,
Wow. It's gonna be
And
weird to watch.
oh yeah, it was. And my heart's pounding, and it goes into the LAD, the lateral ascending
Hmm.
or arterial descending. It's the main widowmaker around
Hmm.
your. So man, that thing comes in, and he injects a radioactive dye, and it lights every blood vessel up around my heart.
Hmm.
Here, my heart is just a pounding,
Wow.
and it truly looks violent.
Yeah.
I don't know how we couldn't have a mechanical device
Hmm.
that operated with that much violence and
Hmm.
survived for 100 years.
Right. Yes.
Don't tell me about evolution. Don't tell me that this is all luck of the draw.
Yeah.
This is remarkable.
The amount
Well,
it takes in a lifetime is tremendous. Yeah.
oh, and so he pulls out, and then he goes and he looks around some other places. Well, I go back in the room, and he told me before, he said, now, if we find anything in there, we'll fix it.
Mm.
And I said, okay, but my cholesterol is low. I don't eat any fruit,
Hmm.
and my cholesterol is 160.
Hmm.
I eat bacon and eggs every morning. I have for 40 years, and my cholesterol is still low. So I'm one
Hmm.
of those classic examples. But he said, if we find anything, we'll fix it. Well, he came in, he threw the curtain. I was in recovery. He threw the curtain back. He said, he said, you want the good news or the bad news? I said, well, give me the good news first.
Yeah.
He said, the good news is you're my only patient out of 56,000 patients that has no atherosclerosis at 70 years of age.
Oh my gosh.
And he says that your coronary health is that of a 20-year-old.
Wow.
And he said, I don't have an explanation for it. And I said, okay, what's the bad news? He said, well, the bad news is we found a congenital heart defect.
Hmm.
I said, what do you mean? He said, you've had this since birth.
Hmm.
And it's called a severe systolic kink.
Hmm.
I played football, I boxed in college, I wrestled, I was very athletic
Hmm.
and never had a problem.
Hmm.
But he pulled it up, and I have the video here on the phone. But the LAD, the main artery that feeds the blood to the heart,
Hmm.
every time my heart would beat, it would kink.
Hmm.
I had a heart attack on every beat
Hmm.
of my heart.
My gosh.
The blood flow would stop.
Wow.
He said, that's called a widowmaker. He said, if you'd have thrown a blood clot when you were sick, that's where it would have lodged, and you'd have
Hmm.
never made it to the hospital.
Wow.
And I was shocked, to be honest with
Hmm.
you. I said, I very athletic. He said,
Hmm.
and I said, well, can you fix it?
Hmm.
He said, oh, he said, we're not going to fix that. He said, you've had that your entire life. I said, well, how long can I live with that? He says, you're 70 years old. And he looks up and he looks back at me and he says, the most I can give you is about 35 years. I said,
That's funny.
okay,
We'll take
that's
it,
okay.
right?
Yeah, yeah. But
Oh my
35
God.
years doesn't seem to, be that long either.
Yeah, right. It goes fast.
Yeah. So
Oh my
then,
gosh.
then my wife, she went in the next day. They wanted to see if I survived, so she would
Oh
still
my
have a
gosh.
choice to make. But
Oh.
um, she volunteered, went in the next day. Her cholesterol runs 260, unmedicated.
Mm.
She takes no statins. She takes nothing for her cholesterol.
Hmm.
So he came in. He talked to both of us. He said, "Now we're probably going to find something with you." He said, "Chronically, you've had high cholesterol. We're probably going to find some blockage."
Hmm.
He said, if we do, we'll stent it and you won't have a heart attack and we can preempt it.
Hmm.
So we sort of went in thinking that she was going to have to have something done. Well, I'm in the recovery room. They wheel her in. He comes in and he throws that curtain back. And he says, I don't believe this. And I said, what? I said, is it bad? He said, no. He said, she has no atherosclerosis.
Wow.
She said, he said, well, he said, with you, Sam, he said, I could chalk it up to genetics. But he said, unless you and Tommy were both born and raised in West Virginia or Arkansas,
Hmm.
he said, I can't chalk it up to genetics.
Hmm.
He said, she has the coronary health of a 20-year-old.
Wow.
And he said, I don't have an explanation for this other than the Velasta.
Mm.
So he called his entire staff in and he said, tomorrow you are all going to be on Velasta.
Wow.
So he's now gone worldwide with it. He's in Spain, he's in Poland.
Mm.
He's putting everyone on it. And I just got a message from him of this 47-year-old woman, severe atherosclerosis.
Mm.
He's put in 4 stents. He
Mm.
tried to get it eradicated. He finally put her on Velasta. And he said, she's been on Velasta now for 6 months. He said, we just have done a scan and her atherosclerosis is gone.
Wow.
He was so excited. And
Hmm.
he said, this needs to be written up. He said, the world needs to know about this. And I said, it's probably safe to do it now because the gig's up.
Hmm.
We sort of outflanked the pharmaceutical world. They can't stop this now. Pandora's out of the box.
Right.
So that's sort of where we are.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh, there's so many things we could go into, and this has been such an eye-opening conversation. I know one that's going to impact so many people, and just give them another option, especially if they're dealing with something really significant now. Like there are other options that maybe you might not even be aware of, and this is it. So I'm so grateful for everything you shared. And for someone who wants to connect with you, learn more about Velasa, where can they find you?
At velasta.net.
Mhm.
And it's free consulting too. We have full-time nurses. If somebody's got any panic fears or they need help, there's no charge. You call the number. It's 803-470-1913. And a nurse will answer and the compassion that these people show is remarkable. They'll talk to them, they'll explain their options. Doctors don't spend time explaining anything anymore.
Mhm.
They only have 15 minutes. And
Mhm.
they end up getting their salaries docked if they spend more than 15 minutes with a patient. This
Mm.
whole healthcare thing has
Yeah.
gotten out of whack.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but at least our nurses will sit and talk. I talk to probably 20 people a day,
Wow.
and they're in desperate need.
Hmm.
And time is not on their side.
Right.
They
Hmm.
need to know about this very, very early on. And the moment they start losing hope, it's
Hmm.
over.
Right. Hmm.
And this is very hopeful. And the NIH reports that support it, you don't have to believe anything I've said. Go to the independent research and at the NIH and Astaxanthin, and you just put that in the search block, type it in that way,
Hmm.
and whatever disease, and all these PubMed, all these NIH papers will start to pop up. You'll be
Hmm.
shocked.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
know what causes cancer,
Wow.
and they now know how to stop it.
Mm.
And but it's going to affect trillions of dollars
Hmm.
because now we can stop the three major killers. I can stop cardiac inflammation. I
Hmm.
can stop cancer. I can stop Alzheimer's and the mental dementia and Parkinson's.
Yeah.
That's it.
A lot of money in all those.
There's a lot
Mhm.
of money.
Yeah. Right. Wow. Well,
And
I really hope that this message gets out and the right people need hear it and are able to really embrace a different way of approaching things and instill hope in them, especially if they're going through something really significant right now. So I'm
yeah,
so grateful for everything you put into it and for sharing it and for coming on today because I know it's going to make a difference in someone. So thank you so much.
thank you for having me, Kelly. And you're doing the world a great favor.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So keep getting the word out to them, and,
Mhm.
and it gives them hope.
Absolutely. And I just, I trust that whoever's meant to hear this will hear this and it will make a difference. So again, thank you. And for anyone who's listening, if you found value in this, or you know someone who really needs to hear this, share this with them and let them also recognize there are other ways to navigate some of these really challenging situations. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thank you for spending this time with me today. If something in this episode stirred your truth, reminded you of your worth, or helped you see your patterns with more compassion, you're already rewiring your life. Remember, you don't have to earn your place, overgive to be valued, or shrink to keep the peace. You get to honor your voice, you get to protect your energy, you get to live aligned with who you really are. If you're ready to go deeper, explore more tools, or join a community of women walking this same path, head over to drkellykessler.com. Everything you need to continue this journey is waiting for you. Until next time, take a deep breath, trust yourself, and keep choosing the version of you who feels like home.